welcome to the Data Thinking Workshop as part of Technology Association of Georgia's Data Science and Analytics Learning Series, which is a relatively new program that we've started that is very much in alignment with our vision at TAG to innovate and connect and elevate analytics and data science in the community. So thank you for being a part of this. This is technically part 2 of a 3-part series, and completion of all 3 parts can provide with a certificate of completion given to you by TAG Data Science and Analytics. If you missed part 1, you have the option to review the recording and just say that you've reviewed it as part of accomplishing part 1. We also have a part 3 that will come up May the 10th that I'll talk about in our closing remarks. So I'll give a little more introduction when I share screen and show slides. But real quickly, for those of you that are willing, if you would like to do a quick introduction, that would be really appreciated. So who wants to go first? Aaron, do you want to go before your dog starts barking, or is he already barking?
Yes, I'll go before she starts barking. So hi, Aaron Squad. Okay. So I am in Atlanta, Georgia, and work for an identity proofing company when it comes to identity verification in the digital space.
Oh, very nice. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yassine, you're next on my screen. Yeah. Do you mind going next, sir?
Sure. My name is Yassine Samad. I'm a business analyst for Cox Communications, and I'm on the process improvement team for our operations.
All right, wonderful. CCI. Brian, you're next on my screen. Can you say hi?
Yes, hi. I'm Brian Coley, a market intelligence manager for Georgia Power Company. My team, we do primary research, secondary research, and data analytics for our sales and marketing organization.
Wonderful. Always good to have Georgia Power, kicking it back from 20-something years ago from when I was there. Ash on. Can you say hello?
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. I am at TSIS down in Columbus, Georgia, running a business intelligence organization to help our consultancy, sales, and account managers understand our issuer business better.
Oh, okay, cool. You guys are headquartered in Columbus with Aflac, and I can't remember who else is down there, but that's right. Isn't that right?
Yep. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of people in at Total Systems, thesis. Very cool. And then there's another Ashley from CCI. Can you say hello, Ashley?
Hi, I'm Ashley Haynes. I'm working with Cox Communications as a data analyst in fraud analytics.
Lovely. And then Gina, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
I'm Gina Poliani, and I'm at the same team as Ashley.
Okay, wonderful. Marie?
Hi, I'm Marie Vachon, and I'm a business turnaround consultant and looking to learn as much as I can to really use data analytics more.
A business turnaround consultant. That is pretty cool. I've never heard that. Interesting. Wesley Jones, can you say hello, please, sir?
Well, hello, I'm Wesley Jones. I'm the lead analytics engineer for the fraud analytics team at Cox Communications.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh, we got a lot of Cox people. I got some communications examples, so this is good. Wesley, did we already get you? Yes. Yassine, Wesley. Did we get Wesley?
You did.
That was Wesley. Yeah. And then Ash and Ashley, and then Gina and Aaron and Peggy.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Peggy Sy, and Beverly invited me today to just share some perspectives on data and analytics. And I am the Chief Data Officer for Big ID, which is a vendor in data intelligence, data discovery, cataloging. but been working in the data management, data governance field for 15 plus years, mainly in financial services companies. So helping organizations understand why they need data, why it needs to be governed and standardized, and how it can help with business use cases such as analytics and compliance.
Love it. And she's one of our speakers, so you'll hear more from her in just a moment. Thank you, Peggy. And lastly, Michael Kelly. Can you say hello, please?
Hey, Michael Kelly. I am with JV Consulting. I am the other additional speaker invited by Beverly to talk. I'll be sharing an example from a project I did for a hospital 2 years ago.
Lovely. Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you very much. Jessica, are other people allowed to share screen, or is it just me?
Everyone should be able to share their screen.
Okay, cool. And Jessica Hughes is our kind of behind the scenes Technology Association of Georgia leader, director, support, kind of our everything contact. Anything you want to add, Jessica?
No, that was a great intro. I'll take it every day. Thank you.
Yeah, and she's the one you'll see the emails from too. So if you search for Jessica, that's probably how you found your Zoom link. Great. Well, I won't share screen and then have to unshare and then Peggy shares. So Peggy, I'm going to let you kick us off. We're talking today about extracting value from data, leveraging analytics to find ways to really extract value. This is something that as part of our 3-part series, we talked first about data literacy, just like, what is data? You know, and understanding that. Now we're talking about how to extract value. And then the third part, we're going to talk about how to tell a good data science and analytics story, like how to communicate findings and things like that. So this notion of really getting the value out of your data is kind of near and dear to me because I've been in this field for a while. Unfortunately, I see too many instances where that's not the goal. Like there's a miscommunication and misalignment between what the data science and analytics teams are trying to do and what the business needs, you know, just because we have different types of goals. So that's what we're going to talk about is just that we all know it's kind of, you know, important, but do we really get how important it is? And do we know how to go forward with this and kind of give you some tips and strategies for how to really extract value out of your data? So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a better feel for how to make that happen. Peggy, I'm going to let you take it away for your first session.
Sure. Thanks, Beverly. And I really love your introductory comments because I focus on, you know, extracting the value, making sure how to build the business case for the valuation, but also interrogating the data, right? And making sure that the data that your data teams are using is accurate, it's complete, it's fit for purpose so that you can actually trust the results that come out of it. So that's sort of my point of view. And as I said in the introduction, you know, as Chief Data Officer, I get the luxury, the privilege of speaking to many data teams across, you know, from retail companies to large financial services companies to, you know, smaller fintech or startup companies. So a really broad range of companies that are looking to build and mature their data programs. And, you know, I'm going to share some of the insights and best practices that have come from, you know, talking to a broad spectrum of folks. So a little bit about myself as well. So prior to joining and working for a vendor and building out a data governance product in the marketplace, I used to work at Morgan Stanley in their wealth management group. And as you know, someone in data governance, I sat inside the analytics group, and you know, I got to see firsthand for myself why analytics and data science teams need to work really close in hand with data governance teams. So I'm just going to share like a product that we launched a couple years ago that really relied on the importance of data, and it showed to the business the really importance of, you know, having good data, but the value that our analytics team was able to provide for the business. And then also talk about some things that I've read and seen across, research like Gartner and Forrester, talking about the success of analytics governance programs are, really aligned to digital transformation projects, and has to be aligned to business strategy in order to have, to be exact, 2.6 times more likelihood for success. So I thought those were just some interesting insights. So I've used some of these slides actually in a prior presentation this week. So I thought I would just sort of reshare some of the importance of this use case. Again, working in, financial services, it's really interesting the fact that, so much is relied on good information, especially if you're, work directly communicating with customers. And in this case, the financial advisors are communicating with advisors. And some of the questions that are, very common across B2C companies are, thinking about retention, what initiates customer churn, what behaviors, and what attributes can be controlled within the behaviors of a financial advisor himself or herself. So some of the questions that were asked in terms of, touch points, what's the minimal number of communication touch points, whether that be email or phone number or telephone calls or in-person meetings, really understanding what is the optimal number of touch points was key to developing what they rolled out as a more of a robotics led, AI-driven led platform to not only drive self-service amongst the lower tier customers, but also understand the behaviors that would better retain customers for a longer term. So those were the questions that the business directly asked, conversations directly with the chief operating officer and the CEO of the wealth management group, really understanding what drivers were important. And then it was the responsibility of the analytics team to kind of work backwards from those questions, right? These were the high level questions, but what's the underlying data that's needed? What type of telephone records could we get? What type of interaction touch points were documented in their databases that they could leverage to do the analysis, right? So, and that's where my team, the data governance team, sort of came in to validate the quality of that data, to make sure that, if they were looking for a specific time period or geography region, assessing the quality of that data that went into the analysis. And that was, some of the more difficult questions that needed to be asked. Otherwise, the qualifications and limitations of the analysis they were doing, had to be made transparent as well. So these were the type of things that we advocated for as we work closely with the analytics team, is, creating an inventory across the board, whether it was this particular business case that we're solving for, or in general, right? Having an inventory or a catalog of what are the known data assets, exactly where that information is stored, maybe perhaps creating curated data sets in libraries that could be reusable and leverageable across the board, across more data teams. And then being able to document what the values of the context of that data is. So, for example, we were dealing with a lot of product numbers and reference codes. And in looking at the tables, were just either a string of numbers or alphanumeric strings, but being able to decipher that and translate that to either product names or codes or names of the topics, we needed to make sure that translation was documented in some sort of catalog. And that's what we helped to build for our analytics team is a catalog that is searchable for available data sets, along with the underlying context of how that data should be used, and then trying to document the reference values. On top of that, it's really important to know who the right business owners are, or data stewards, or data owners. These are people that are familiar with the data and can be participating in answering questions and reducing the friction of finding information. You want to make sure the ownership model is quite clear. So things that we work to push for is improving and modernizing our analytics governance program, was to strengthen our master data management program, our reference data management, making sure that we're leveraging not only internal but external data sets that can be used to validate data. So in our case, a lot of addresses and phone numbers, those are things that can be verified through a third party to make sure that they were actually accurate and valid, for example. And then these are additional things that we didn't have time to work on, but really leveraging machine learning technologies to verify our data quality instead of having to do that manually or waiting for data quality issues to come back. For example, having emails bounced or letters bounced back. We wanted to make sure that we were taking a proactive approach to looking at the quality of the data, which is, oftentimes the inputs into a lot of the analysis to make sure that was right. We also worked on, self-service models to access the data. We didn't want the data to be governing the data and having restrictions to that data be slowing down really how quickly and agile we wanted our analytics teams to work. And really taking advantage of the fact that, there's a lot of streaming data, analytics data from websites, a lot of what we call unstructured, newer types of forms of data. We weren't really capitalizing on that, but making sure that we can make that available to our data science teams for their analysis was really key. So some of the, the pitfalls really that I advocate for, having worked on these types of projects is, really have clear alignment to what the business benefits and outcomes are, understanding the business KPIs or metrics that ultimately is being measured on, and then making sure that, you have the business sponsorship at the very early onset is really key to securing funding or additional resources, as we know the longevity of these projects can be quite long sometimes. Number two is actually the most important one in terms of analytics projects and outcomes, is to have really good data storytelling skills. And I know that's something Beverly, you advocate for as well. It's not just the fact that you've done this great work, this great model results, but being able to explain it in a way that resonates with the audience, and really knowing the audience is, for the most part, not as technical, not as data focused, but being able to translate what the meaning is of your analysis directly into business speak is so important. And I always like talking about the emotional value as well as to the importance, and really using that to drive the story home to the audience is really key. So this is really a quote from one of my customers. She's a chief data officer of a large technology software company, a visualization company. And she likes to say, we cannot get insights on our data without actually knowing our data. And, that's part of, some of the projects that I work on with customers today is how they're building and reorganizing their teams. And some of the, more effective ways is, when a chief data analytics officer, not only do they have ownership of their data governance and data quality teams, engineering, they own the platform, they own the data science, the analytics teams, which is great. But what I've been seeing actually is a chief data analytics officer also take ownership of, any team that focuses on machine learning or RPA, any of those functions. I think in one team working under the operative of a CDAO is even more effective, because they're focused under the same objectives, the same from end to end, starting from the data creation, the data validation, and then actually executing on that in its projects. Having that ownership under one team, makes things much more efficient and sometimes more cost effective as well. So seen a lot of success in some of the organizations that where under one leadership of a data executive, if they have broader ownership, they can really do a lot more effectively. Yes, RPA is robotics process automation. So Gartner likes to say that, and this is according to their 2021 report, through 2025, which is only a couple of years away, 80% of organizations that are seeking to scale their digital business will fail because they did not take into account modernizing their approach to data and analytics governance. So that's really key in terms of organizations today that are, perhaps continuing what I would say non-modern approach. So non-modern approach would be leveraging human capital to continue to collect and curate and validate data. It's just very time consuming from what I've seen. And there's a lot of new technologies and platforms that really take advantage of the synergies that you get from data management and applying that directly into analytics, and not having that friction between the two is really going to be a key here. And again, what I see from organizations today, that are really maturing in their data maturity level, looking to, get above, a beginning or moderate stage of their maturity, is the fact that they're overwhelmed with their data, right? That's a statement that can be said across all organizations. And the analogy that I like to talk about is, an iceberg, right? There's the tip of an iceberg is a very small portion of what you see. And that's what I like to call the known data. That's what's easily accessible. So that's why data teams and data analytics teams gravitate toward it, because that's known. They can report on it, visualize it, analyze it. But then what organizations fail to do is really take advantage of the data that is beneath the iceberg, the unknown data that's in unstructured formats. It's not connected to their master data management platforms. It's a lot of the, what I call dark data that's in siloed databases. It's not really part of the enterprise yet. Those are just some examples, but organizations that are successful in connecting the data that's beneath the iceberg to one that's, to the known data, have a better ability to answer more business questions, to be able to identify additional opportunities for product growth, really identify and answer questions much more quickly and much more accurately, because they have a complete understanding of all the data that's in the organization, and that can also impact the organization. So any company that can really tackle all these types of data has a higher success level to not only extract value, but to potentially monetize on their data as well. So here's some key questions I always like to ask and make sure that's available from a data point of view. And I have a next slide on from an analytics point of view. So from a data point of view, you want to ask, is the data trustworthy? So is there a process within your organization to have a certification process, a scoring, or even a validation review that's signed off by the business stakeholders and as well as the technology stakeholders? can you trust the data? That's because ultimately, if you can't trust it, you shouldn't be reporting and using it. The second thing is the data leverageable. So I always focus on the reusability of data. Oftentimes you want to make sure to ensure consistency on reporting the numbers. You want to make sure that you're starting from a base point where data can be reused if appropriate in other cases, and then also is it accessible for other data teams to review and to look at as well. And then is it safe? Like that's the most important thing, especially when it comes to from a data access control point of view. Do you have are the right people that have permission to use the data, can use the data, and is the right privacy and security measurements in place to make sure the safety of the data is there. So I'll end this my remarks with this slide here on key analytics evaluation questions. Before starting any project, really looking at understanding what the business outcomes and benefits are. So whether or not you are leading an analytics team or you are running the analytics yourself, having that clear vision and being able to articulate that within your team and externally is really clear. It makes having that big picture is really clear. And if you're not sure about what the KPIs are, what the outcomes that you're looking for or the questions that you're asking, it's being able to clarify that within your team, with your manager and with the business stakeholders is key. Finally, last but not least, oftentimes what I'm seeing as well as soon as an analytics project finishes, I think there's even more work that needs to be done to make sure that post-production actions are there in place. Making sure that the quality of that data is still being monitored, making sure there's no drifts in the data, having some type of data observability practice is really important because you want to make sure that even in production, you have the controls and processes in place to make sure that the intended activities for that model is still being done. So it's not like something you can just ignore, right? So having those post-production controls and processes in place is really critical. So that said, Beverly, I will end it here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise I'll let you continue on with your agenda for today.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Peggy while we have her? I especially love the part about the, aside from the data storytelling, which you knew would be a hot button for me, but the problem framing, it's not uncommon. I know this sounds really weird, but it's not uncommon for us to answer the wrong question or for us to develop a solution that's just not what we had intended. Like the business has a hard time articulating what's really needed. Data science teams have a hard time understanding what's really needed. And so I love that you talk about that. Like it's not okay to just, sort of want to jump in and start on something. You have to really take the time to figure out what the problem is.
Yeah, and I've seen,
Any questions? Yeah.
From an organizational perspective, data science teams that sit within the business, developing that business domain knowledge is also quite key to make sure that whatever analysis they're doing is pertinent and relevant. So that's also important.
Yes, love it. Brian.
Yeah, I noticed you put in the chat the Gartner quote, and that hit me as well. The 80% of businesses are going to fail unless they take a modern approach to data analytics and governance. And I'm curious what the difference is maybe in a historical approach and a modern approach, maybe from your perspective.
Yeah, so I had it briefly on one of my slides, and it's talking about there's opportunities to leverage more of the automation when it comes to building out some of these platforms. So having a catalog or inventory. I think this is a question on the chat as well. There are ways to do this with automation. There's, a lot of times technology teams and data teams are creating this manually. So again, it's just a matter of doing things more in a smarter way, right? So I would say that having machine learning to look at your data quality, to put together an inventory what your available data sets are, to really help with the insights that can be derived from outliers in data quality. And I think that leveraging more the self-service modeling, I think that's not new, but that is still fairly new in terms of how you want to distribute the knowledge across your organization. You want to make sure that you're empowering the business teams to review and validate the data as well. So being able to have a centralized but also a decentralized model for sharing your information is quite key. So I would say leveraging new technologies to automate the creation of this data platform, but also rethink about how you're structuring your organization in terms of where the power and processes lay. And also Gartner has some great papers on this, so I won't paraphrase a lot of what.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
I tried to summarize in just 2 key words, and I think it's, self-serve for sure, but I think process and automation are 2, if you want to look at 2 ways of trying to position in your head what advanced data management looks like. Is that fair, Peggy, to say that those are 2 key phrases?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I've done data management for a long time, and if you talk to anyone who's been doing it for at least 10 years, it's predominantly historically a crowdsourcing approach to curating the data and validating the data, and it's not scalable.
Yeah. 2 more questions. One is, inventorying and knowing your data can be like a massive thing. And so how do you start like eating that elephant? As a vegan, that's a gross statement, but you get the idea. Like, I know this is going to be a big deal, trying to say like, okay, well, we need to have, enterprise-wide understanding and inventorying of our data. How do we start on that?
So I would say an old approach that was usually taken is start by one domain, one line of business at a time on inventorying and documenting that information, or focusing mainly on your main data warehouses or where the predominant data sources are being kept. I think I would say that's the old approach, only because that's very slow and takes a longer time to prove value. And oftentimes, if you don't quickly show value, you lose your budget and funding, and people lose interest in data governance. And that's very honest.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say some real talk with Peggy here. Okay, good.
So
that's good. We got to hear it.
Got to hear it. So I used to have managers that say, don't boil the ocean, meaning you can't do everything at once. Take it slow, focus on maybe the critical business processes like client onboarding, for example, is a very common one in banking, or focus only on our data lake or one data warehouse. But the reason why I've been very frustrated, and I've seen data governance teams churn, data leaders get replaced and with a new one, is the fact that they weren't able to add value quickly enough. Once things are inventoried and cataloged, it changes, right? Information and data changes daily. if not more than daily, frequently, every depending on the type of data, it can change very often intraday. So how do you keep up with that if you're doing things manually and you're relying on this slow validation and approval workflow? So the answer to that, and I'm not going to plug my company, but there are technologies out there that can focus on all types of data, being able to use machine learning to understand the data from all types of data sources. So looking not just unstructured databases, but looking at unstructured files and documents, and automatically creating a catalog and an inventory. So that's where I say we can boil the ocean. We can show value much quicker and much faster because there are technologies that did not exist 5-10 years ago, right?
Love
so
it.
there's really a new age
Love
in
it. Very
terms
good.
of data management.
Yes, I think I'm hearing some amens too. The last question, you talked about buy-in, which is another hot button for me, but the advocacy and the buy-in from senior leaders. Tell me more about how, let's see, go back to that question. Everybody kind of has their own, truth or source of the truth. So tell me about the buy-in aspect of data and analytics projects from your perspective, Peggy.
Yeah, so I think I have more of a different approach, only because I've always worked in enterprise roles where we had to force the lines of business teams to play with us, right? So we, as an enterprise centralized team, we offered these sandbox, we offered the tools, we offered the visualization platforms, and we needed the separate lines of business analysts or business analysts to come in and to participate with us. So I think it's in terms of, everybody can have their own version of the truth. I don't think that everything needs to be exactly the same across the board. I think everyone can have their version of the truth. But it's a matter of perhaps linking them together and understanding where they are the same and where they're different. And that's where a core central team can really help to differentiate and those nuances. So I've certainly seen in cases, different lines of business can have different interpretations and definitions and calculations of data. But as long as everything is documented hopefully in a centralized or authoritative repository, and those differences are documented, it's perfectly acceptable for multiple versions of the truth.
Gotcha. I have a funny story that I'll tell y'all real quick. My students, sometimes they'll graduate and they'll go job, and then they'll come back to me and they'll say, like, I did this really cool project and you'd be proud of me. And then I went to present it and nobody listened. Like, nobody paid attention. They didn't do anything from it. It's like it just ended up on the shelf. How do I make my presentation more acceptable and consumable to the business leader that requested it? And I said, well, first of all, it's not your presentation. That's not the beginning. It's a relationship. Did you do anything to understand their business? Like, did you walk a mile in their shoes? Y'all, I used to run a nonprofit called Athletics, and now I run the TAG Data Science Analytics for Good initiative. And I have literally required my data scientists to go meet with opioid people that are addicted to opioids, because we were doing a project about opioid addiction. And I feel like if you don't really understand the business side or the business question at a deep level, they're not going to listen to anything you say. So that buy-in it's not just about how you present your data. It's about that relationship that you build over time and how you can sometimes walk a mile in their shoes and they have a better understanding. I mean, Brian, when I was at the utility company, I was doing work with industrials. I would put on my closed-toed shoes and trek through some of the industrial customer plants to see how they were using energy. And that gave me a better understanding when I was analyzing the data for the industrial customers. So I'd say part of the buy-in can have a lot to do with trying to understand their perspective. Peggy, always awesome. Thank you so much for your insights and knowledge. And we really appreciate you being a part of TAG Data Science Analytics Learning Series.
Thank you so much for having me, Beverly, and thanks everyone for your time today. So appreciate it.
And please connect with Peggy on LinkedIn. She's always posting some kind of wonderful content. She's also a very sought after international speaker. So I would strongly recommend that you follow her. Great. Next, we have Michael Kelly. Where's Michael? There you are. And I haven't even shown you the agenda yet because I'm trying to get people when they're available. And Michael is available to talk to us. So we're going to go ahead with Michael right now. And then I'll give you the actual full agenda. We have another speaker coming in at 2:30. So Michael, I'm going to let you screen share and take away your portion of the leveraging analytics to extract value present.
All right, I'm going to attempt to share in presentation mode, which doesn't always work, but I think it's working.
Yep, we see your screen. Yep.
Great. So, yeah, I think Peggy's presentation was great. I agree with a lot of it. Her focus was heavily on data management and sort of having that infrastructure around having good data. The story that I wanted to tell, I think, comes at this from a little bit of a different angle. It's an example of using data analytics to solve a business problem, and just straight up the value that we were able to provide to a past client who had a pretty big business problem to solve. I think I mentioned I'm from JB Consulting professionally. I'm also part of the TAG Data Science Analytics Board with Beverly. And so a few weeks ago, she said she needed some extra folks to speak on this. And I said, I've got a story I can tell that may be relevant. So I've genericized a few things and left out some of the details. I'm going to say that my client was a generic health system, and they owned a large hospital in a medium-sized city. Somewhere in, I'll just say the southeastern US. And this network owned a number of small county hospitals. The official term is critical access, which means it means some things about the regulatory environment that they operated in. But all of those hospitals had small inpatient units and emergency rooms and a handful of surgical suites. But they would still send their sickest patients to the main hospital in the city. They would have, a 3-bed ICU in these little hospitals. They couldn't handle everything there, but it was kind of a community health center. And the system also had a range of outpatient facilities around their service area. And the problem that they were faced with, that we were brought in to help with, the inpatient unit at one of those small hospitals, which was about 40 beds, 40 inpatient beds, had been built maybe 30 or 40 years prior. I don't remember the exact time frame anymore. This was a couple years ago. But the fact is, it didn't have room for modern standards of care. There were not full, all the different hookups that you need to attach all the various modern devices. From an IT standpoint, they were kind of not up to modern standards. Generally speaking, they needed to make some improvements to these rooms to be able to support, 21st century medicine. So what's a hospital to do? Well, one option is to build a new inpatient unit. They had plenty of land. This was out in a kind of rural area. They could build basically a new wing, a new inpatient unit on the hospital, and then put it next to the existing building and just redirect the operational flow that way. They could renovate the existing unit, or they could conceivably close the hospital to inpatient services. That is not what they wanted to do, but depending on the price and the opportunity of the other options, they said that was something we had to consider because they may effectively be forced to do that. So the question was, how do we it wasn't a straight kind of cost benefit question, because this is, part of a system, and this hospital on its own isn't really expected to be a profit center. But they do have to think about cost, and they do have to think about revenue, while also serving the patients in the community. So what are they to do? The approach that we came up with was to, think of this as a business problem first. We need to understand the revenue and the cost of each of these options. The hardest part of doing this is understanding the volume of patients that are expected to come through the hospital, and that's most of what I'm going to talk about for the next several slides. There were several other pieces to this. We did look at floor plans. We evaluated the spaces. We compared to industry benchmarks. That is using data that was collected by other firms. Those industry benchmarks were something that was published by a healthcare organization, and something that we were able to kind of lean on to understand how much space was appropriate. We did a lot of interviews with staff at the hospital to understand what specific problems were being solved, so that we made sure, or what specific problems existed, so we made sure that we solved them with whatever solution we came up with, and also understand what things worked well. One thing that we heard was that the general flow in the hospital actually worked pretty well, in terms of you didn't have that long of a walking distance between the different units in the hospital, the inpatient area, the emergency department, the diagnostic areas, et cetera. And then we were consultants. We didn't actually know how to build a hospital, so we partnered with an engineering firm that was on site for us as well, to figure out the cost estimates for each of the potential future layouts. But the hard part and the fun part from my end, because I was the data guy on this team, the fun part of this was figuring out how many patients are gonna make use of this facility. So we kind of had 3 steps here. We need to figure out what the community need for healthcare facilities is, what the trends in the market share are, so we know how many of those people in the community are going to use our facility. And then third, looking at the operational data to figure out if X number of people show up on a Monday, what does that actually mean for the hospital overall, all the different services. So data piece number 1. I will say that that map is from a different project, but just sort of representative of the kind of output that we had made. I was trying to keep everything generic for this. We used census data. When you're doing data related work, you don't always have to use fancy internal massive data sets that are collected from all these different customer interactions. No, we use census data. Which is publicly available, and you can download CSVs, and they're great. We looked at zip code level census data with demographic projections. And what we did with that was understand in each of the zip codes, mainly in the county this hospital was in, but also in some adjacent counties, how many people of what ages are going to live there for the next 5 or 10 years. And then we used some industry data again. So I don't know if I can quite say publicly available data, because you do have to pay for it, but you don't have to collect it yourself. Data on how many hospital services tend to be used by each of these groups of people. So the example I put on here is men age 65 to 75 average 300 inpatient units per 1,000 people per year. I made up that number. I don't have the true number handy, but there's this data is out there enough. The Center for Medicaid Services, CMS, they collect this kind of stuff, and you can actually get a pretty good idea based on the population of a particular area, how many emergency room visits they're going to be in a given year, how many x-rays will need to be conducted in a given year. And this is easier in a relatively small town like we were working in than it would be in a big city where the people movement patterns are a lot more complicated. So you can take the population projections here, and you can take the utilization by age here, and you can kind of do some matrix multiplication, and you end up with an idea of how many inpatient visits are going to exist over the next 10 years for the people in this county. So that was step 1. Step 2 is we looked at our own market share, the client's own market share. We looked at, based on the last several years, we have an idea of what the community's healthcare utilization is, and we know how many of them came to this hospital. I did mention that, we've got the big city hospital that's 45 minutes to an hour away. So some people just go straight there for more critical needs. There's also another hospital, another town that's in the other direction. So people go there as well. So we need to understand what the actual market share is of these inpatient visits. And then we used a lot of the qualitative information, not technically data science going on here, but we looked at, they had a specialist who was retiring. And so they knew that they weren't going to get as many orthopedic patients over the next few years because they weren't going to have the specialists doing their surgeries in the surgical suite and then having those patients spend a day or two recovering. So they had to take into account things like that, not data, but relevant. So with all of that together, we felt like we had a pretty good estimate for how many people are going to come in the doors of this hospital for inpatient care. We were also looking at the emergency room. We were also looking at surgical suites. We were also looking at the diagnostic facilities, X-rays, CT scans, MRIs. But the focus was on the inpatient units because that's where they had the biggest kind of facility need. I want to pause here for a second and comment on the very last thing that's written on this slide. This was not a big data problem. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, those things are very powerful and also very trendy. And I have had clients come to us saying, we want this solved and we want it solved with a machine learning model. And the first question I asked them is, why do you think that this needs a machine learning model? And they said, well, we know that's what everyone's doing. Well, that might be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the correct way to do this. I often find as a consultant, if I can build something in Excel, I can give that to my client in a file format that they can actually use. And then they can actually, even building a little dashboard in Excel or something. And of course, you could go up to, Power BI or Tableau if the data sets are getting a little bit bigger. But doing something with data sets that are a little bit smaller means if it's the appropriate data, disclaimers all over the place, right? But if it's the appropriate data and you can do it in a simpler, kind of lower horsepower tool, then the organization can potentially apply that more broadly and also make changes to it on their own going forward. Now, for folks on this call who are the BI team within their organization, maybe that doesn't apply as much. But if you're working with a team that you're going to hand things off to, being able to give them a file format that looks familiar to them, a lot of times goes a long way towards helping them realize the value at the end of this. Okay, so we've estimated demand. Now we've got to figure out what, skipping ahead. Now we've got to figure out what that actually means for the hospital. Okay, operational data. We know for the last several years how many people have arrived every day and how long they've stayed. We can do statistics on that and we can build probability distributions. So we can also do statistics on that and estimate, I said, day of week and month of year adjustments. So we know, for example, in the winter, in flu season, and this is a pre-COVID project, so COVID trends weren't really a thing, which I'm sure a lot of this got blasted out of the water when COVID arrived, but looking at flu season, you tend to get more hospitalizations for certain age demographics and things like that. This county had a number of summer camps, and so in the summer they would get more ER visits because of more teenagers in the woods, injuring their bones and joints and things. Those don't result in inpatient utilization, but the emergency room sometimes gets busier on weekday afternoons in the summer at this place. Anyway, the point is, if we expect 3,650 inpatients to show up next year, we're not getting 10 per day every day. We know that certain days of the week are going to be more, and certain months of the year are going to have more, and so we end up with an expected value of inpatient arrivals every day of the year, and then a random distribution that we can hang around that expected value. All of which is building towards a Monte Carlo simulation. I don't know at this point if I should explain what a Monte Carlo simulation is. I'm guessing that this audience is savvy enough that most people have a general idea, but I guess I'll give the 30-second version. Monte Carlo simulation is basically randomly generating numbers according to a known distribution, and then using those as inputs into some sort of analytical model. You run that simulation model lots of times. Lots is a squishy term, I know, but you run that simulation model a lot of times, and then you can look at the outputs to see what range of outcomes you may get based on your range of inputs. So that's what we did. And here's what we got. The histogram on the left there is the simulated bed need for the year 2021, which at the time was in the future. And what we did was, again, we used the model that estimated how many inpatient visits they were going to have. We used their own data on how long patients typically stayed in their facility if they were an inpatient. And the way the model ran, every day, a certain number of patients would arrive, a certain number of the existing patients would have completed their stay and would leave. And then at the end of the year, we could look back and say, well, how many beds were occupied overnight, every night for the entire year? And the unit at the time had 40 beds, and they knew they didn't need 40. And in fact, if you see from this model, the daily census basically never hit 40 at any point in our model. They had a renovation plan that would allow them to renovate those 40 rooms into 32. They were going to take certain groups of 3 rooms and convert them into 2 side by side. And then in some cases, they were going to expand some single rooms, but those details aren't important right now. The fact is they had a plan in place to renovate that would give them 32 beds. And the question to answer was, is that going to be enough? And with this model that was based on all of this cool data, we could say pretty much yes. What we saw was that if you had 32 beds, you would only have them completely full between 4 and 5 times a year, which resulted in about 16 sort of extra patient transfers. And I already said at the beginning of this is a small county hospital. They would transfer patients to the big hospital a couple times a day, maybe anyway, if they're particularly busy when the patients were extra sick. So an extra 1 or 2 transfers a month was kind of in the noise for these folks. It did not present operational challenges because they already knew how to do it. And there's a little bit of extra cost there, but not really a whole lot. There's some extra stuff behind this that I'm not really going to get into today about looking at different patient acuities and ICU beds and observation status and those sorts of things. But the big takeaway was all those different data things at the end spit out one nice, pretty graph. It's pretty easy to understand, we thought, to say, look, this is what we expect your census distribution is going to look like, a few years from now. And it basically said you're usually going to have, 15 to 20, 21 patients at a time. We reported all kinds of statistics on this as well, of course, didn't just show them the graph. But the big takeaway was if they were going to construct a replacement unit of 40 beds, it was going to cost them $5 million, roughly. Again, I'm kind of tweaking the numbers, but it was going to be about $5 million. A renovation plan was possible for about $500,000. We established just a moment ago that they don't even need 40 beds in the first place. Building 32 new beds instead of 40 might have cost $4 million instead of $5 million, maybe, because you're scaling down a little bit, but there's certain kind of fixed cost of doing the whole big thing. So we basically said, if you can do this with a renovation, you can save $4.5 million in construction costs. Now, I guess caveats, there's some operational challenges associated with keeping a hospital up and running while you're doing renovation. But the good news in this case, since they weren't at capacity, is they could renovate 5 to 10 rooms at a time over the course of a year, only taking a few beds out of service as they went along, gradually making the facility smaller in terms of bed count. And for the most part, it wasn't going to hurt nearly as much as the construction cost of building that whole new wing. So I see a couple of questions have popped up in the chat. Let's see what those are. Oh, that was just Beverly contributing things like she does. Does anyone have any questions about the project or any of the stuff that I talked about?
Aside from cost reduction, were there other KPIs? Were y'all looking at things like, I don't know, lives saved or anything like that?
truly quantitative KPIs, it was a business decision. However, we actually spent some time with this health system. We did a similar kind of work at 3 different hospitals for them. At one of them, the big question was they had a maternity, they had a labor and delivery unit. And it was trying to figure out, at that hospital, one of their big challenges was they were delivering about 200 babies a year. But it doesn't, I mean, many people on this call probably have a kid. They may remember that when a baby is born, overall, you're looking at a couple of days worth of healthcare being provided. And so 200 babies a year, their average census was only like 2 or 3. And the number of staff and the facilities that it took to keep it running were quite expensive. And so for them, there was a question of how much can we afford to spend to keep our labor and delivery unit open. And so we also were looking at demographic projections and market share things to help them figure out how many deliveries they could expect to do in a given year. But in the end, it wasn't strictly a business decision because this one was about an hour from the nearest other hospital. And so if they weren't delivering the babies here, they would have mothers in labor driving an hour to get to a hospital. And
oh my gosh.
Say, well, that's not really ideal.
Yeah, so it's definitely a quality of life improvement opportunity that probably happened.
Right.
Another,
and,
thank you for that, Michael.
Places, it can be different. Go ahead.
Yeah. Another question, this is a great question because this could represent, the results of this could represent a huge change from what they had planned to do. So was it difficult to have trust with the decision makers that really don't understand the black box that was produced, especially with it being, it wasn't regression, it was Monte Carlo, you know? And so how did you, especially being a consultant, how were you guys able to help the consumer of the analytic solutions really absorb and trust the solution?
Sure. One of the things that I did not build slides around was sensitivity analysis. Well, as a quick aside, it's a lot easier for them to be happy with it when we told them you can save $4 million instead of we told them you have to spend an extra $4 million. So people are quicker to trust if they like the answer. I'll throw that out there. We do sensitivity analysis, and we basically said, what if we're wrong by X percent? And so, we said, what if patient volumes are 10% higher than we're expecting or 10% lower than we're expecting? And we're able to show kind of what that does to the outputs of the model. Which I guess is a little bit different from saying building trust, but it does kind of give them a little bit of okay, if you think that we're not quite as smart as we say we are, what are the potential consequences of that? And so we did we did run the model again with kind of a range of different inputs. And what I showed here was, our best guess, but we also acknowledge that, it is a guess. And, you can put a confidence interval something all day long, a 90% confidence interval is still wrong 10% of the time. So we acknowledge that, but
okay, so you were ready to justify. It's not enough to just tell and explain. You have to defend it. You have to justify it. And it sounds like you guys were ready with some kind of if-then.
Yeah, and the other thing, going back to what you were saying right after Peggy's presentation, we met with these folks constantly over the course of the project. And we tried to show them enough of the detail and the steps along the way. We didn't just, show up for a couple of days, gather all the data, go back to our office for 6 weeks, and then return and say, here's your answer. We talked about, okay, we're going to build a demographic model, and here's our demographic model. And we could show these hospital leaders, we project that your county actually has negative population growth, but more senior citizens are moving in. And so because of that, we expect the need for healthcare to increase a little bit because older folks tend to need more healthcare than younger folks, other than brand new babies. But overall, your population is decreasing a little bit, which counteracts that. And so we could show them intermediate findings like that. That is a finding that's much easier for a local who lives in the community to kind of say, okay, that feels right, rather than to just say at the end, you need 32 beds. Is a little more, I don't know if that's right, but we could show them the intermediate steps that are easier for them to validate.
Yeah, no, that's great. I put a quote in the chat from Eric Schmidt from the Coca-Cola company, who runs the global data science team for TCCC. And he says, never have a ta-da, like disappear for 16 weeks and then come back and say like, ta-da, here's the surprising, surprises and the findings. They should be involved throughout multiple steps. Like that's why, even in my classes, I teach a milestone approach, like step 1, step 2, meet with your client, explain how it's going. And there won't be these big moments of oh, wow, I did not expect that.
Right.
Very good advice.
That's never
awesome. Good. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much to Michael Kelly for talking to us about this use case around extracting value, leveraging analytics to extract value in a hostile environment.
Sure.
Michael's not only a consultant, but he's also a board member for Tag Data Science and Analytics. So thank you for your service, Michael.
You're welcome. And I don't really do much of anything on LinkedIn, but Javian does. So feel free to follow Javian, even if you don't follow me. So.
Awesome. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And I'm going to talk about what we're going to talk about. We had to sort of jump in right away because I wanted to make sure we, Peggy's very, very, very scheduled and Michael is too. So I want to make sure we got them right away. And then at 2:30, we actually have someone coming as well. So our agenda was we had Peggy talk about the importance, and she specifically talked about the data side. It's funny because we tend to sort of forget about the data side and how that impacts the analytics side. And then developing value from analytics is Michael Kelly, which we just heard, and then Achille is coming at 2:30. I'm going to tell you a little bit of 1 or 2 case studies before Achille gets here. And then I'll end this off with ways to get started. A lot of people hear some of these ideas and they get all excited and they're like, what do I do now? Like you want to move things forward, but it's a little tough. And then we'll have some final remarks from Jerry DeMasso from Access Group. And you guys probably saw, some of you did, that we ended up moving the date for this because we were trying to, we're sort of pushing for the in-person events. And so Access Group was going to be our in-person, our space host, but we ended up moving to a virtual again. So here we are. But thank you to Access Group for for trying to be a part of our little network here. So quick background on myself. I'm a consultant and an analytics strategist for a consulting company called Access Group. And I'm a professor for the center and a director for the Center for Applied Business Analytics at University of South Carolina. I don't know if we have any Gamecocks out there, but go Gamecocks. I'm also the chair for Tag Data Science and Analytics and the vice chair. For those of you involved in Informs, I'm the vice chair for Informs Analytics Society. And I host our podcast called Tag Data Talk. It's Technology Association Georgia, Tag Data Talk. And I also host a more academic podcast called Analytics Out Loud. If you're interested, especially some of you CCI people, if you're interested in serving on Tag Data Talk, it is pre-recorded, so it's very low stress. We can do it via Zoom, or we can meet in person at a studio called Patchworks in Midtown. Really, really fun to meet in person. It is a rapper studio, so it has certain nuances with it. It's very interesting place to record. So if you're interested in serving as a guest on Tag Data Talk, feel free to reach out to me directly via LinkedIn. Access Group, just a little bit about the space sponsor. They're about enabling and empowering people to innovate data to make a positive impact on their organization. So this data enablement idea is kind of like what Peggy was talking about, and it's what moves companies from just having data to having real meaning. So let me skip this because we already talked to Peggy and we talked to Michael. So let me cover just a little bit about why this actually matters. And like I said, I want to get to at least one case study before Achille joins us at 2:30. So why does extracting the value matter? And I know that we've done this in sort of webinar format up until now, but if possible, I would love to have you guys participate. And you don't have to show your camera if you don't want to, but just verbally, can you give me some suggestions as to why is it important anyway to conduct analytics that are really value oriented? Like there's kind of the carrot and the stick. There's a benefit, and then there's a risk of not doing this right. So can you help me understand in real terms why it's important that we extract value from our data? Oh, I got some stuff in the chat. Proactive decision making, yes, absolutely, as opposed to the reactive. One thing I tell my students and my teams is we don't want to be in a position of becoming kind of order takers, where we're just being told what to analyze and we go analyze it and it doesn't really have any real impact. But being able to position yourself in a more proactive decision-making fashion, that's a great reason. Why else is it important for us to get real value out of our data?
I think data is a strategic competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And if you're not doing it, then your competitors will, and they will. I mean, it's been proven. I'll show you in a second, but data definitely has a strategic competitive advantage. Okay. Any other thoughts about why it's important that we extract value from our data? Avoiding repeating mistakes. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Working more efficiently, also very important. So one way to think about it is, I'm sort of aging myself here, but do you guys remember that when the 2-liter bottles, I think there used to be 2 liters of Coke, they had that little plastic thing? Do y'all remember that? Remember that little plastic thing on the bottom of the 2-liter bottles, that it was like this weird cup? And changing that and getting rid of the cup and sort of just making the plastic just a little bit stronger on the bottom, it saved a lot of money. So one way to think about it, if you think about a company like Coca-Cola, one change that's tiny multiplies very quickly in companies like UPS and Georgia Pacific and Coca-Cola, where the numbers are just enormous. And so by leveraging your data, by leveraging analytics to improve your operations and work more efficiently, you're saving the company like XXX more money than it costs for you to actually analyze it. So for sure, it would help work more efficiently and avoid repeating the same kinds of mistakes you've made in the past. Find that diamond in the rough. Okay, companies that tend to extract value from their data, what do they look like? In general, an overwhelming majority, almost 90%, y'all, say analyzed data is essential to the organization's innovation strategy. And that's by HBR. That's a pretty valid source. So 90% analyzed data is essential to innovation. Firms that have advanced insights-driven business capabilities are almost 3 times more likely to report double-digit year-over-year growth. So now we're talking innovation and growth. If someone were to tell me, hey man, I can help you figure out how to have 3 times better growth. I mean, it's not exactly the way it's worded, but I would say, tell me what to do and I'll do it. So according to Forrester, we have almost 3 times more likely to report double-digit year-over-year growth compared to firms that are not having insights-driven business. And then thirdly, companies that leverage data analytics tools have 15% more sales. Now that is hard to get a 15% increase in your sales. But companies that leverage analytics tools have 15% more sales than companies that do not. And that's right here in Georgia, according to the Small Business Development Center. So I find these numbers very influential. If I were to hear these sorts of things as a senior leader of an organization, this would really motivate me to want to leverage my analytics and my data to extract value. Here's a case study that it's just a one slide on this case study based on a colleague of mine that used to work at a media company. So at this media company, nobody really knows the contents of the episode except for CCTV, the closed captioning, before the episode airs. So they were trying to figure out, like, how can we customize the advertisers of each episode for this particular series? So for example, does anybody watch Friends? I would say that I'm dating myself, but now Friends is like come back or something. Anyway, so I love Phoebe. I thought she was so cute. And so in one of the episodes of Friends, you can tell by the closed captioning that Cece's going to adopt a cat. And for those of you that are into NLP, natural language processing, just by reading the closed captioning, NLP can find the tokens and figure out, like, oh, well, the story is going to involve, there's multiple stories in every Friends episode. There's going to be all these different stories, and one of them, Phoebe's adopting a cat, I can tell. So based on the NLP, by using the closed captioning in advance of the episode being shown, this media company was able to target advertisers. And so we're talking, PetSmart and Petco and kitty litter and cat food and, cat toys and all kinds of like cat related. It's going to pull on the heartstrings, especially for the people that are watching the episode. It's thematic advertising that goes with the episode. And you're seeing this more now. This was like 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago that this company was able to do this. From this analysis, the increase in revenue, like not revenue they would have already gotten, but the increase in revenue for advertisers because they were willing to increase the amounts that they were paying for targeted advertising, it was an improvement of $850 million in revenues over a 7-year period. Now, if I could go to my boss and say, we spent some money because this is a, data science team with 8 people, they're not cheap. And they did some other projects too, of course, it wasn't just this one. But if I could say we saved y'all $850 million over 7 years, wow, can you imagine? It's amazing. So I wanted to share that use case with you because I thought that was such a wonderful one. I would take a screenshot of this slide because I really, if you guys want to really try to improve how to leverage your data and your analytics to extract value, these are some questions that you can walk through with members of your team and your coworkers just to see approximately where you guys feel that your group is. So we're probably all familiar with the Gartner Analytics Maturity Curve and how the increase in complexity also increases the value that you see from your analytics and your data. So I would challenge you to think through, where is your group? As far as your team, where would you position them on their analytics maturity? Did you say it's sort of, beginner or sort of mid-level or, babies, teenagers, or adults or senior citizens? Like, are you running AI? Are you just trying to figure out where your data is? You're probably somewhere in between, but try to figure out, where is your group? And secondly, how can your group advance? Just try as a group, like 2 or 3 people, try to come up with 3 things, 3 ways. There's going to be a ton of ways, but try to think of the 3 top ways that your group can advance in the ability to extract value from your data. Thirdly, and you're going to have a lot of these, what are some of the barriers that you want to overcome? And then maybe even what are some of the ways to overcome them? And this could be through senior leadership involvement having some advocates and some executive level sponsorship that help you overcome some of these barriers. This is not an easy exercise. I've had some of my executive education through like teach exec ed through UGA and Georgia Tech. I used to do Georgia Tech, now it's mostly UGA. And these kinds of questions can sometimes even be emotional. So I'll do this maybe over a brown bag or an exercise that you do with your team or with a parallel team in a different functional unit. But it's a very interesting exercise that can help you have conversations with your superiors during your reviews and other times. So we started square foot gardening recently, and I love square foot gardening. It's a way to get a lot of gardening done in a very small space. And I like to think about this analogy to your data. So for example, you have tomato seeds, okay? And I sort of think of this as individual data elements, right? These tomato seeds are kind of gnarly looking, aren't they? And they don't really give us much. Like I wouldn't just walk up and, well, I might because I'm, kind of strange, but and vegan. But normally you don't just like walk around eating tomato seeds. Like let me eat some tomato seeds. It's not really consumable. But if you plant them, and you start getting these guys popping out of the ground, and you're probably not going to walk up and just like start eating it. Turn your head sideways and start eating it out of the ground. So you're probably going to actually pick certain parts. I don't have a picture of it, but I learned recently that Brussels sprouts actually have 3 really good parts to them. There's a stalk where the balls that we see in the grocery store, the little balls that are the Brussels sprouts, that's what is on the stalk. It looks really gross actually when it grows, but the stalks hold those sprouts. And then there's the leaves. And then on the very top of the plant, there's it looks almost like a giant Brussels sprout. It's like a cabbage head or, fairly large Brussels sprout on the top. My favorite is actually the leaves. My second favorite is the sprout on top. And then my third favorite are the actual Brussels sprouts. And I love Brussels sprouts. I just had no idea they had 3 parts to them. So knowing from, like, say, these are data tables, knowing what parts are most important is kind of, you're pulling from that what's most important and getting those nuggets. But that's still not quite extracting the value. It's not until you mix them into a wonderfully tasty vegetable soup that looks like a minestrone or something that you have something that is truly consumable. So think about that life cycle of like data tables, what's meaningful, and actually creating results that are consumable. You don't really see the action until the soup is actually eaten and provides energy. Not that kind of energy, Brian, but human body energy. So it's that cycle that you have to walk through before you truly start seeing the value. Hope that makes sense. I like to talk about gardens. And Achilles already here. Hey, Achilles. I just have a couple more slides to walk through. I want to go through one case study before I turn it over to you, if that's all right.
Sure thing.
Cool. Joining us from Canada. Okay, so in these examples that I'm going to show you, this is the general format, is that you typically have features on the left-hand side, and those lead to a certain KPI on the right-hand side. And usually these are, your whys, your response metrics, and those, hopefully, this model leads to a decision. Now, unfortunately, many times a decision in the mind of the person asking has already been made, and they're asking you to help them justify it, which is not the right way to go. What you should start with is kind of this. What are the whys? What are the KPIs? What's the business question? because the business question is going to help you establish, like, what are we trying to figure out? You know, once you have that business question, you can figure out, what am I trying to figure out? What am I pointing to? And that's your whys. I'm majorly oversimplifying, and I'm kind of assuming a predictive model here for, but there are other types of models. So this is typically the general form of a model. If you've never seen models illustrated this way, I would encourage you to go to Google Scholar, and it's just scholar.google.com, and put in, I don't know, anything. So if you're with CCI, you could put in like, you know, understanding churn, or you could put, like if you're with Southern Company or Georgia Power, you could do like differences in energy usage or something like that. And there's all kinds of articles, and the models are typically illustrated in this format with the response metrics on the right-hand side, the features, the X's on the other side, and ultimately to make a decision. So that's how I've illustrated some of this for you. Okay, so here I have several examples, and I'm sort of pressed for time here, so I want to pick some really fun ones. Okay, let's look at this one, because this was actually a propensity churn for a communications company. So, for example, if I'm trying to better understand the propensity to churn, then what I would do is I would first go to Google Scholar, and I would type in like likelihood to churn, and especially in the customer experience and utility, or whatever kind of, whatever you're looking at. So what's the propensity to churn? Well, there were 3 main buckets of areas that came up. One is product related variables and X's and features. Another is the subscriber, stuff about the person that lives in the household. And those both impacted the customer experience itself. And so the customer experience is what directly impacted churn. So yeah, these things in red mattered, but they didn't, only in so much as they impacted the experience, and then the experience impacted churn. So your first question is, how do we measure churn? Like, what is churn? Does churn mean you completely leave the company, or does that just mean you decreased your services, or does that mean, like in the natural gas world, you can remove everything except the fireplace starter, and you hardly ever use that, but maybe you don't change that out. So does that mean there's still a customer? Like, at what point is considered churn? So you first have to define churn and what that means. Once you finally have that defined, and it could be multiple measures too, in which case this will make this a multivariate problem. But if you have one, it's more of a univariate. So propensity to churn, you first have to define. Product-related types of features would be available services, different kinds of equipment, what's geographically in this area. Things about the subscriber, are there kids? What's the technology acceptance level in the household, especially the way media and different things are being consumed right now in a different way, like people are watching on devices, television uses, media habits, those sorts of things, we believe have an impact on churn ultimately. So how much do these things impact someone's customer experience? Well, how do we measure customer experience? There are many ways to measure customer experience. Some of them include if they call, if it's like a trouble call, if they provide feedback to the company, if they have truck rolls, like a truck actually comes out to their physical location, that's when you know, like, it must be pretty serious. The use of communication methods, if they're calling you every day, those sorts of things. And their general mood, even sentiment that you can measure through a chat conversation. So from this, we were able to tell how much impact do product-related questions have on experience that then impact propensity to churn. And how much influence do subscriber-related metrics impact experience, which then impacts churn? Now, interesting, this is called a mediator, by the way, because it mediates the relationship between these two things in red with the ultimate darker gray propensity to churn, which is what we're interested in. So this mediator of customer experience is very, very important. The entire model is moderated by the type of home that we're dealing with. If it's single or multifamily, if it's rented or owned, and if there is a competitive product nearby, or if they're fairly captive. So these moderators is what they're called. This is a mediator customer experience. This thing here, these are all moderators. But these moderators had a big impact on the results of the model. So it's like basically, actually, for those at CCI that have been there a while, my former boss, Kurt Grippenstraw, he used to call a moderator, he called it a switcher, because it's like it switched the whole model. So you're using the same model, but you're running it like 6 different times, so rent versus own, single versus multiple, competitive versus non-competitive, 2 by 3, so 6 different models. And there are ways to automate, so you don't have to literally run it 6 times, but you produce 6 models to see if there are differences. So that's what moderators are all about. So from this, we were able to better know how much does presence of children impact someone's propensity to churn at certain stages? How much do the trouble cause impact the propensity to churn? How many negative sentiments does someone have before they finally churn? Like, if you can get in front of some of this, then it helps you know when to communicate, what to communicate with different customers before they leave your system. Very valuable. Does that make sense so far? Hopefully. Okay, let me cover, gosh, there's so many cool things I want to cover. This was a computer vision project. The safety one. I'm gonna do the safety on-time delivery. That was, okay. Let me go to safety. Okay, so this was a project done with 4 different clients. And I can tell you who they are because none of these are about any one client. So this was done across 4 different clients. And so Delta, Clorox, the Home Depot, and another company called MS Companies. It was like a staffing, blue collar staffing for plant operations company. And we were looking at safety. So for illustration and for ease of understanding the value of this analytics project, I want you to think about Delta. Just think about, it doesn't matter if it's Delta, just think about an airline to make it easier to anchor your thoughts, okay? So the first thing was we said, well, what's the business question and what are we focused on? And that's our why. And we were trying to figure out safety measures. Well, what's safety? So we always have to ask these questions right up front, like what the heck is safety? Safety can be claims. Safety can be the days out. Safety can be the severity of accidents, whatever. So for this purposes, I want you to think about safety as an OSHA recordable incident. Non-OSHA recordable is like, I was playing pickleball yesterday and I broke my thumbnail, right? That's not OSHA recordable. Like, I need to get over it, right? OSHA recordable is like if my thumb came off. So things that are OSHA recordable, Occupational Safety Hazard Association or something. Anyway, so an OSHA recordable incident. And so let's think about it from counting how many of those. So obviously we want to understand and minimize OSHA recordable incidents. Okay. So Google Scholar, conversations with the client, whiteboarding exercise with the team, those 3 things led us to these 4 big buckets. These 4 big buckets of attributes included human-related type of stuff, things about the individuals. So if you're talking about police officers, if they tend to be more risk-oriented, then they're probably going to have higher incident of OSHA recordable, type of things. The Home Depot employees, if they tend to be more risk-oriented, and sometimes this is based on things like gender even, there's a relationship statistically that they're not worried about the little boxes, and the big boxes, obviously you need help, but the medium boxes are tricky. Like you think you can get it, you can't quite do it. So things about the human have an impact on OSHA recordable. The second big bucket were operational and corporate things. So this could be, schedules, like is somebody working 14-hour days? This could be employee density. This could be the processes and procedures, could be, different types of things like that. The physical assets that you're dealing with, like y'all will probably start noticing if you haven't yet, but on a plane, the position of the bin makes a difference. It's the overhead bins, if they're sideways, they're actually, I think, a little bit safer than the ones that were straight. The jump seats that the flight attendants use, the in-flight staff, they pull down jump seats. And so those carts tip over, by the way, that they roll through. They don't tip over often, but when they do, it's probably a disaster. So physical assets and equipment. One of my teams at Georgia Tech, when we were running the Home Depot project, they looked at different manufacturers, manufacturer A, manufacturer B of forklifts, and found some differences there. And so the physical assets can have an impact on your safety. And then fourth, macro factors. Things are, most of the time out of your control. So like weather, season, it gets darker at certain times of year, and especially in a warehouse environment like in Clorox manufacturing, the darker can sometimes increase the number of incidents. In the same way that driving in the dark can cause more accidents, manufacturing in the dark, if you will, can sometimes cause more OSHA recordable incidents. So these were the four big buckets that we were analyzing to figure out how can we better understand where the highest priorities are. Because obviously you want to get better at everything, but you don't know where to focus. And so from this model, like I said, there were multiple versions of this. So there's no one answer that I can tell you right now, but this is how we set up the model to help us figure out where can we focus, how can we modify, what can we do to reduce the OSHA recordable incidents happening in our plant, in our retail environment, in our fill in the blank on our planes. So that's another quick example. And then the last example before I allow Kelly to talk to us is this is a really fun one. So those of you that are in the digital space will probably understand this a little bit better, but I have faith that we'll all get this. Okay. This was when I was at an advertising agency called BKV, which got bought out by Drum and then ended up closing down after COVID, which is sad, but it was really fun. And we were working with a company that their actual business is a little boring. So I'm going to use a different analogy, but it's the same exact thing. So imagine that you have a pet and you just adore this pet and you want to have a matching shirt with your pet. Okay, I have a dog named Kisses Amber and I just adore her, and so I want to match her and we want to have shirts together. Well, it turns out that Gap and American Eagle Outfitters, you can buy shirts that match your dog, And so I'm going to go online and I'm going to put in like matching dog shirts. And it turns out that Gap and American Eagle Outfitters have these. Well, I've been shopping at American Eagle Outfitters since I was like literally 14, maybe 13. And so I've already heard about them. I still shop there quite a bit. I've definitely already heard about them, but I didn't realize that they had matching dog shirts. So from searching generically, a generic search doesn't include a brand name. The generic search would be matching dog shirts, right? From that, I learned that American Eagle was relevant to matching dog shirts. That's called awareness of relevance. So then I go to search again, because, you know, we never buy the first time, do we? So I go to search again, and this time I put in American Eagle Outfitters matching dog shirts. That's called a branded search because it has American Eagle Outfitters in the search. Okay. So branded search, and I'm looking through and I find a cute pair and I get a shirt, and Kisses Amber gets a shirt. And so that's called a conversion. When you make a purchase or you bid on something or you make a phone call, whatever action the website is trying to get you to do is called a conversion. You've converted that person to do what you wanted them to do. In this case, I made a purchase. Okay, so if you just looked at the purchases and you said, all right, this person made a purchase on the website, what was the last click? What was the last thing they did? Oh, they put in American Eagle Outfitter matching dog shirt. Well, this is where it gets tricky. I hope y'all are paying attention. Companies have to pay Google for search terms. And the cost of dog shirt is very expensive because that's generic. Everybody wants to buy dog shirt. I mean, I want to buy the term analytics and have every time someone types in analytics, it comes up Beverly Wright. You know, but Achille wants that too, right? And, you know, maybe everybody on this call wants to be affiliated. You'd have to pay Google a lot of money to have your name come up first on the term analytics. So generic searches are very expensive and branded searches are not as expensive, not nearly as expensive. So if you were short-sighted, you would say, oh, well, the last thing they put in there was American Eagle Outfitters, you know, so all I got to do is pay money on the branded search. But they never would have typed that in if it had not come up when you put in the generic search as one of the, you know, first page results. This is called a spillover effect. And so in attribution theory, which Avinash Kaushik is the leader of, but in attribution theory, when you're trying to attribute, how much does the generic search impact a conversion compared to a branded search impacting the conversion? You have to figure that out. You have to extract that. So we were like, oh my God. And it's funny that Michael talked about Monte Carlo. I didn't actually know he was going to talk about Monte Carlo because we had to use Monte Carlo. And so I looked it up on Google Scholar and I'm like, oh man, how are we going to do this? And me and my team were, you know, a little worried. We ended up using Proc MCMC in SAS. It's multi-chain Monte Carlo. And it worked really well to extract how much impact does the generic search have on the branded search and what's the level of spillover to ultimately lead to a conversion. And from this, we were able to direct and guide the company on here's what you should pay for a generic search versus a branded search because of the spillover effect. Very, very useful. This was a huge expense for them to have to know how much money to attribute to these different terms. Okay, cool. I could go on forever, guys, because I've been very fortunate. I didn't really do an intro, but I've been in analytics and data science for 30 years. I've run hundreds of projects, either through class or as a consultant or as an individual contributor or a team lead. I've been in academia for 20 years, consulting for about 12, and on the client side for about 11. I know that is more than 30 years because I do things concurrently. Right now, I work for University of South Carolina and I work for Access Group part-time. So that's, you know, sort of where a lot of my stuff comes from. But anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. And Achille, I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. But if anybody has any quick questions for me, I'm happy to address those. Okay. If you think of any, feel free to put them in the chat and I can try to, yep. I can try to answer them in just a second, but if you want to put anything in the chat, feel free to do so. Otherwise, Achille, I'll let you take it over.
Hey, listen, thanks for having me, and I'm sorry that I came in a little late. I don't see anyone, so no one's on camera, Bev. I only see myself and you. I don't know. Hi, Aaron. Nice to meet you. I don't know if you guys are open to it, but please open your cameras. And I'll say for my session, or what I'd like to ask is, what have you guys found thus far that's been the most intriguing and value from this session? And what do you want to hear more of? And there is a method to my madness. You just got to be patient with me just a little bit, but anywhere, because I'll be asking you if no one answers. It's a quiet group. Come on. What did you get from the session? You were here. Did you like the session? Brian, did you like the session?
I did, yes. Thanks. Sorry, I had to get off the mute there. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what did I like the best. Certainly, I'm certainly in a cycle of ramping up data governance and data analytics as a model for the organization. And so for me, it's understanding what types of things we need to build into our plans and what the future looks like versus, where we may have been or where data and analytics may have been and where it's going. So for me, I'm kind of focused on what the newest and best opportunities are for us to move forward and how we can avoid the pitfalls of the past, if you will.
Okay. And do you find this easy? You said that like you got everything under control. Is this slam dunk? You know what you're doing. You're good. Project delivered in 3 months.
Sometimes it feels like the blind leading the blind, but we are doing our best. I would say I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk, but we're starting somewhere and going from there.
All right.
Yeah.
Aaron, how about you?
Sure. So what I've been finding valuable is we're still at the infancy when it comes to this. So we're a startup company. We have data in many different systems that we're trying to bring together, and everyone's trying to get the same interpretation, which that's why my question to Beverly earlier, I mean, it's easier said than done because everybody has their own data and their own way of interpreting. And how do you get an executive team to all be on the same page so that we can make unified decisions that are setting us up for success? So that's what I found interesting is we're more at the starting point and trying to make our way towards good data analytics and then using that data analytics for a proactive decision making.
Okay. And are you in the private sector, public sector?
Private.
Private, okay. Yazin, did I say that correctly? You're on mute. You're on mute, but I'm glad you came on camera.
Yazin, close.
Okay.
I guess for me, a couple of things. The first being, someone mentioned documenting your or cataloging how your data is being pulled. And for me, I'm in the early phases of understanding data analytics. And so those little tidbits of information are great for me as I try to learn more about data analytics. The second is one of the examples of just using data analytics to solve a problem. And a gentleman earlier talked about the hospital and whether they needed to expand and spend so much money to establish more beds, but then the data showed otherwise. And data showed that they can save quite a bit of money by just doing a renovation that could provide more beds by a simple renovation than just spending millions of dollars. It was nice to be able to see how you use it to problem solve.
It's like a different way of thinking, right?
Right.
It's looking at a particular problem set and putting a different lens to it. And in terms of this session, Yazin, what would you want? What would be a win for you to get out of this session? Would you say, you know what, it was time well spent? What would you want to get out of it? One thing, two things, up to you.
Just some takeaways that I can use in my everyday activities. like the first example I use in terms of documenting how I'm gathering the data and creating like a repository for the team, and they can also reference that information as well. So I'm going to use that today or tomorrow. Definitely. As I start researching
I'm writing this down because I'll go back to it. Okay, so now some of the people that haven't come on camera, and that's okay, but I'm going to call some of you, so I hope you're on. I'm going to start with Marie. Marie either doesn't like what I'm saying or is not with us, and that's okay. We'll go to Gina. Gina.
I agree with what Yassine was saying about the hospital beds and not needing as many as they thought they did until they looked at the data. And even if when you have the data, you have to be willing to accept what the results say, even if they go against what you thought.
And so having said that, what would be the one thing that you want to get out of today?
I like some of the graphs that Beverly showed, some of the images, some of the different ways to think of data. So I like visuals.
The visuals you probably won't get from me, but I'll tell you, Bev's been in it for a very long time. I'm sure if you email her, she'll definitely share them.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, the group here, are you taking a course with Beverly? Is this an association where you guys are just meeting from different aspects in Atlanta, North Carolina, or from all over? Where are you guys from?
Several of us are from
This
Atlanta.
was advertised. Yep, this was advertised through Technology Association of Georgia. And so we've got mostly Atlanta-based and Georgia-based kind of companies. And these are, from what I can tell, and some of these people I already knew, but leaders of the teams, as well as some individual contributors and maybe some sprinklings of entrepreneurs.
I like that, entrepreneurs. Okay. Who's the entrepreneur in the group? Don't be shy.
Aaron, I was thinking you were.
Well, I'm with a startup. So we're in a startup in identity verification for digital channels. But that whole industry is growing by leaps and bounds. So yeah, I guess it's more entrepreneurial. We're definitely at the infancy in a lot of things when it comes to data.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go down my list here. I'm at Ashley.
Hi, yeah, so I'm helping build out a business intelligence team for some of our consultants that work with our banks. I'm at TSYS, and so we have a mountain of data that we're trying to get our arms around, because up until this point, every team just kind of goes and does and executes to get stuff done quickly. So it was really interesting to hear Peggy talk about some of the best practices that she's seen. That was a lot of good information for me to go research how to use a tool to document and inventory our massive amounts of data instead of spending years and years trying to build a data dictionary. So that was hugely helpful. And so I have a lot of stuff I'm going to take away from that talk and try to go ahead and do the research. I think we already have what people want out of the data. We have a lot of creative thinkers, and this is what we should investigate, and they have good hypotheses, but it's just actually getting the structure and the access and all of it where we can get it out quickly.
Those are definitely, if your banks are as regulated as ours are in Canada, you're definitely in for a fun journey. But those tools that Peggy provided definitely help in helping with data lineage and I don't want to say breaking down the silos, but at least understanding them where they exist. Okay, and Wesley.
Hello. So, I like attending these type of talks just to hear what's on everybody's mind and what approach they're taking to make sure that I'm not forgetting different things that are out there and have my head so far in the sand of what I've been doing that I forget all the other possibilities. And so at the beginning, we talked a little bit about data management, and that's something that really kind of hit me because everyone on my team is pretty new and they have a lot of capability, but we still have a ways to go on learning what the data actually means. And that's because we don't have a really good structure on defining the data that we have. So I want to see if I can do more with that.
Okay, that's another big one. These are all meaty. These are all meaty topics. We can definitely, and you probably will spend a lot of time on them. I'm going to try and hone in on the various different parts. But I'll tell you this: the way I do, I'll say my talks in this type of environment is please use the chat room to ask questions. You can interrupt me at any time. And then there's some kind of major themes I kind of want to walk you through, and hopefully, you grab some nuggets from me in terms of how I have, I'll say, learned and continue to learn on how to extract value, how I define value, and more importantly, please share your feedback, because as much as I like to think I'm sharing nuggets, I want you to share back, and maybe I'll take some things back and refine my thinking. So my background, in terms of in my professional background, I grew up in the finance world, and then specifically supply chain. And so I saw in one of Beverly's presentations there that I saw my old company, Fennec Robotics, great company, great Japanese company that has done a lot of work in the automotive industry from where I come from. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. And I share this because I didn't realize all the different nuggets of analytics and touch points and analytics that I've had over the course of my career. The second phase, in terms of where I spent some time, or a lot of time in, was in Walmart Canada, bringing grocery to Canada. So I was part of something called Project Tampa, which brought groceries, Sam's Club to the Canadian land space, and it's definitely not as, I'll say, big as the United States, but from a Canadian perspective, it was a massive, great project, great learnings for myself. And I use supply chain because that's kind of where I've learned a lot over the years. From there, I went to a company called Loblaw. Loblaw in Canada is one of the biggest grocers in the country. They run about 2,500 stores. Loblaw, with all its companies that roll up, are a $65 billion enterprise. I had the good fortune of working there for a number of years. Spent a lot of time in supply chain, reconfiguring how delivering retail food and goods, and how to work with our vendors in such a way that we'd maximize, I'll say, our profit potential and the opportunity to make money on both ends, along with satisfying the customer at the same time. I helped build out what we called an analytics council. And at that time, we were just a bunch of curious people that really loved to use Excel, probably more than our own good, and all had the desktops under our desks that we hid from IT, because IT wasn't helpful at all. And I'm good friends with them, by the way. So I'm saying this tongue in cheek. I hope you guys capture that. And we struggled. And I will tell you that the aha moment for me was when I got tapped on the shoulder. I was actually doing a talk at P&G in Cincinnati, and I loved it. I was like, I was there with the supply chain leader. I was like, we nailed it. We did so great. This was fantastic. Let's get on the plane. Let's grab the Sam Adams in the airport and go home. I got tapped on the shoulder and I said, "Hey, Achille, we're taking you off the supply chain project, and we're going to second you. We're doing something called Project Red Robin is what we called it. And Red Robin was us purchasing something called Shoppers Drug Mart, which is similar to your Walgreens or CSV. And it was a significant undertaking. In Canada, it was one of the biggest acquisitions that we've seen. And it was something where, we put together a team, and it was predominantly, I'll say, my team, to learn how we can leverage the synergies from this M&A activity. That's a whole bunch of gibberish for saying that if I knew now, back then, my life would have been a whole lot easier than sitting in a room with a bunch of folks and eating McDonald's, eating the different things, working long hours and learning, I'll say, our trade or our craft. But But what resonated with that and what was very powerful for us is, we learned quickly that we were good at what we thought we knew, but there was a whole world out there. And that world for us consisted of, I'll say myself and a few other individuals, knocking on doors and partnering with the right university, the right people, the right companies, the right associations. We learned pretty quickly that we went to Harvard, Columbia, Western, Stern. Where else did we go? Stanford. We ended up partnering with a company called, a school called Queen's School of Business. Now, truth be told, the reason we did that was because the family that owns Loblaw comes from Queens and does a lot of sponsorships with the Queen's School of Business. And so we supported and funded that school and helped prop them up as they propped us up. We built our own analytics program that evolved over the years. And it's quite interesting. I'd like to share a video, Bev, if I can, to kind of explain and show you what the magnitude was of, I don't want to say how good we were. I think we were a very large company. I think we did a lot of good things, but there's so much that we learned over our time that, by using certain processes or documentation and governance, like Yas and you talked about, and Brian, we helped ourselves change the actual culture of the company to whereas if you look at it today, it's a data-driven organization. And a lot of it's been molded from some of the, I still consult with them, I still work with them, to some of the things that we've done. Our journey was, I think it's over 10 years now to where they are today. And they have a long way to go because it's constantly changing and the science doesn't change, but how you apply it to different situations or market conditions is always is an opportunity, I'll say, for any company, let alone Loblaw. So can I share a video, Bev? I can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I hope there's no problem, but sometimes when you share a video, you have to click some kind of box to make sure that we can hear the audio. So let's see how it works.
All right. Hopefully someone can help me here, but give me a sec.
Okay. Or at least that's been my experience. So hopefully it'll work.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
You see flags?
Yep.
Yeah. And I press play, so I'm gonna. Do you guys hear that?
Yeah. No, that's what I was saying. There's some kind of button
Yes.
that has to be.
Hi, Kelly. So if you stop sharing, sorry,
okay.
everyone. Yeah, stop sharing. And then when you go to hit share your screen again.
Okay.
Before you click anything on that share your screen tab, you'll see a checkbox at the bottom where it says something about audio.
Oh, perfect.
Yep, hit
Share
that
sound.
and then share your screen.
I'm going to be sending you up here. We'd call it Tim Hortons, but I think I need to send you a Starbucks. Give me one sec here while I get organized. You can hear that now? All right. Today, we're going on a journey. Welcome and thank you for coming to Loblaw's first analytics conference.
Today is really about identifying the fact that there are teams all across our organization that are doing analytics to support our business. And today I want you to come away with, who are those other people? What are they doing? How can I help them?
It's really just amazing to see sort of the cross-section of people that we've got from the various business units here today.
In our average store, there's about 50,000 items. We have over 1,000 stores just in the LCL network alone. One key thing that our team has done has been able to scrub this data and make order out of this chaos.
We're extremely excited about the future. We're going to build on the trends of multicultural. We're going to build on the trends of health and wellness. And we're going to build on the trends of unique innovation when it comes to fresh food.
So the longer term view for the pharmacy customer experience is actually being able to leverage a lot of the insights that you guys are producing with our data or the rest of the data as it relates relates to the customer experience.
Whose basket is 80% of the same every week? I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. That's where everyone who put up their hand gets taken advantage of by PC Plus. By putting those relevant offers in front of people that they already think they buy every week, you're driving actual incremental sales. None of the analytics behind this stuff matter if you don't wrap it up in a compelling customer value proposition.
And I really like when organizations make decisions based on analytics and data versus gut feeling. And collectively as a team, we have to be comfortable with anyone challenging statements and actually being fact-based in presenting those statements.
I think the energy is amazing. It's the first time that I actually see a conference like that at Loblaw, specifically on analytics. I think it's a step in the right direction.
I think what I took away was just the sheer numbers and interest of individuals. It shows that there's a huge, huge desire and hunger for analytics.
Our next guest speaker is from Disney, the Disney.
That's really what I think about what analytics is all about. It's a way of counting cards within your own businesses, right? It's trying to find ways to just improve your odds slightly of making better business decisions. Does it guarantee you're gonna make the right decision every single time? Absolutely not. But it does guarantee you're gonna increase your odds of making those better business decisions.
Analytics for that data quality is like owning a fast sports car, washing it and polishing it every day to make it look its absolute best, but putting underperforming gas in the car. So enterprise data essentially has two objectives, to keep it very simple. One is to improve the quality of data by bringing in a data governance practice and set of principles. And of course, the other piece is to ensure that every one of our strategic projects and initiatives has a strong, robust data strategy and is included as a linchpin of every single project going forward.
We're going to be building what the foundation is. And the foundation is going to be using strong iron pillars, getting interactions from everyone across the business, and getting input from all sides. And the key thing that I haven't seen is we're going to have senior leadership commitment.
From an IT perspective, we're thinking and thus acting differently about how we support you from a data and analytics perspective.
I hope coming out of today, some of you are going to reach out and let me know how we can help you, whether it be platforms, tools, technology, data, capabilities, where you're struggling with something or you just want to understand how to do something in a different fashion.
What you can do is close the gap between when the customer is interacting with you and when you're making decision points. And so what Mark was alluding to, from deterministic to probabilistic, which is where we are with PC Plus right now, to real time, is really the arms race in the space right now.
I think that analytics is just a waste of time and money if it's not connected to strategic objectives. On the other hand, these days in a competitive environment, the only way you can implement your strategic objectives is by using analytics.
So as you can see, when you use analytics to make decisions, you can actually succeed at a much faster rate.
I had no idea we had so many analytics professionals in the company, so that's a big eye-opener for me.
This conference has been fantastic. The Disney presentation was fantastic. It's amazing what Disney does with their customer analytics and personalization models.
I think in terms of our blue culture principles, and this resonates with us well, resonates with me pretty well, you know, we were pretty authentic here. I think we built a lot of trust, and judging by our breaks, we definitely made the connections. The challenge up to everyone else now is utilizing what we've done here today to make better decisions.
I think today was awesome and a great start indeed of a journey that we're embarking on. And it's, for analytics in particular, very exciting, I think, because analytics, in my view, can truly be a strategic competitive advantage for lawnmowers.
You guys give me 1 sec here before I get climatized again. I think I'm back. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. So what do you guys think? A quiet group.
I mean, I guess first reaction is that it's interesting so many companies are elevating this. I mean, some of the titles that you saw were leaders of the organization, not necessarily in the data analytics space. So I feel like we've gotten the attention that we asked to get as data scientists. So it's that's what I like seeing. I like seeing that we do have a seat at the table, and then we are a part of regular decision making.
I'll share with the team, unless you got any comments, please, share what you say, or sorry, what you're thinking. But in order for us to get there and to get those different groups, business units, to actually sit in the same room was a hell of an undertaking. Truth be told, we just wanted to go for lunch one day at one of our, we purchased the old arena where the Toronto Maple Leafs play. And we only have 6 minutes. Oh, I didn't realize. I thought I had an hour. Sorry, Bev. Okay, well, I'll fast track this real quick. We started off with 50, and then my first conference, ended up being 500, and then the second one hit about 1,000. Now we're 200,000 employees strong. We, as you can see, we're good friends with outside people that I was at Mark Schaefer's son's wedding this past week. Like the circle of people in this industry is very small. And so what you do is you just continue to learn over the years. I'm very happy where Loblaws is over the 10 years. And what I do is I kind of go into a little more about what I talk about: people, process, technology. And we can, I don't know, we can talk afterwards. If you want to stay afterwards, I'll stay, or can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I literally talk about, these are different things about how those people that are in there, in that little talk I just did, one of them started with me. He was a grad, and now he's as vice president within one of the market divisions, which again, it's not done overnight. It's done over time with a whole group of people with different strengths. And if you build it in such a way where innovation or fail fast, you learn from those things. So we learned a tremendous amount. What I'm doing today is, obviously I do a lot of consulting. A lot of those people over there are my friends. So, Jeremy P is at Mark and Spencer. So I do stuff with Mark and Spencer in the UK. I do different things with Jim Noteboom, who's at the Bay, or just different kind of projects within the circle of people I've worked with in the past, along with Loblaw. But the thing that I hold the most pride in is I built up my family business. And this is the thing that people don't know about me. I mean, I have a family construction business that rents, equipment, to job sites. And, we were a small mom and pop when my family had it. My father passed away. This is why I had to leave Loblaw, and come into the family business with my brother. And, today we have about 250 pieces of assets that generate, passive income for us. And it allows me to do, the things that I want to do with my life, which is spend time with my family, keep in touch professionally with people all across the globe, and continue to learn. I love to learn. I'm probably not doing this talk the justice that it needs, Bev. So I'm sorry. I'm happy to stay longer, or, if you guys have questions, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I didn't realize it went over my spot, but I'll kind of shut it there unless there's any questions.
We ended up shortening the time because 4 o'clock was exhausting for like a full 3 hours was exhausting. We shortened it to 3:30 end time instead of 4. So sorry about miscommunicating on that. But yeah, Achille is a big thought leader. He's always producing excellent content on LinkedIn and elsewhere. So feel free to reach out to him in that format. And I'm sure he would love to chat with you more. I also want to make note that notice that he talked about analytics advocacy, and that's not any less analytics than data science projects. I just want to point that out, that the use of a conference, for those of y'all that are at CCI, are y'all still doing Cost Analytics Summit? Not to put you on the spot, but are y'all, is that still a thing? Have you heard of Cost Analytics Summit?
We haven't done it for the past couple of years because we do meet in person for it. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I bet if it weren't for COVID, you probably would still hopefully be meeting for that. So, and again, I'm not trying to sound braggy. I'm just pointing out, like, Achilles showing you something that's very I'm going to call it analytics enablement oriented, where you're basically elevating analytics and data science, you're stimulating innovation, and you're encouraging collaboration. That's a very hard thing to do, just to get all those people in the same room at the same time. So back in the day, I want to say it was 2013, 14 maybe, I don't know. I started Cox Analytics Summit. And at the time, it was like, what? Stay in your little cubicle, like go away. That's weird. And we had to go to SAS, guys. We had to go to SAS to find out who the users were. We had no idea. Like in that conference she was saying, I had no idea there were this many people at the company that were involved in analytics. So we had to ask an outside vendor to please tell us who the analytics people were. And she did. And it was like 117 names or something. Well, 400 and something people showed up to this conference, because even though we only invited we started with the invite of 117, there were the IT groups that were interested in knowing, like, why are y'all always asking us for data? There were the consumers of the analytics, like these are the marketing leaders or the operational leaders that were requesting the analytic, and they wanted to hear what was going on. And so I brought in all these outside speakers. I know it's a little more internal now, but we had like an internal panel, and then we had outside speakers, and it was just a full day of learning and networking, and it created an advocacy. We actually created what we called analytics champions in different divisions. Back then it was Cox Media Group and all these different divisions. So at the time, I hope that it continued to be useful after I left Cox, because I know that they ran Cox Analytics Summit for several years after that. And it was amazing what kind of transformation we saw as far as leveraging data to make informed decision-making. So not always about a data science project. Thank you, Achille, for your talk. And again, sorry for cutting you off a little short there. What I'm going to do next, very quickly, before Jerry does our closing remarks, is I'm going to, can you guys see my screen okay? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm just going to share some quick ways to get started. And so these are kind of the takeaways. Again, I would recommend, I recommend a screenshot on that other slide so that you guys can have conversations as a follow-up, but almost homework. But the second screenshot I'm going to recommend is this slide. So a lot of people say, oh man, that's great. What do I do now? I'm going to go boil the ocean. No, I don't recommend that. So a couple of things that you can do to get started are just a handful of things to do. Number one, try to choose an easy kind of problem. So choose something that is a relatively straightforward business problem. That attribution thing I showed you, that's not an easy problem. That was a really hard problem. In fact, the name of that company was Hubzu, and the team of data scientists, y'all listen, this is crazy. It was required by that company that you test as a genius in order to work in their data science department. That was our client. So I was incredibly intimidated to do a project for them, but it ended up being a huge success. And so we looked fancy. But don't start with something, like attribution theory and having to, start with something simple, a simple, even correlation or something that can help solve a business problem. Second, start small. Yes, of course you want to better understand churn. Yes, of course you want to know the right products to put into market. Yes, of course you're trying to figure out how to improve the operations, and reduce costs by 20% or whatever. But try to start with something little, something that only affects a certain portion of your business, maybe a certain type of your customer or whatever it is, that you can pull off this little nugget. Thirdly, and this is not easy, is try to get a champion. I know like Cheryl Presley, Brian at Southern is very well respected. Brian, you're really well respected. Pedro Cherry is really well respected. Like there are some people that are very well respected in different companies where if you can just get them, don't be shy. You know, I know it's hard because most of us are data scientists, so we tend to not be incredibly extroverted. But don't be overly shy about asking, you know, for chats. And you can position it in the form of a mentorship to start off with, or just collaborating together. But try to form partnerships and get champions that believe in the mission of analytics. And number 4, this is very tactical, okay? When Michael was talking about the project with the healthcare system, he was saying, well, we knew for sure there would be some counter, you know, like, hey, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? He was ready for the argument, you know, and be ready for the argument. So in my case, some of the projects I did, especially early on, now it's not so bad because people are more accepting. But especially early on, I had to say, this is a result based on the analysis. This is the decision you would make without the analysis. And you can calculate the difference and what kind of impact it's going to have. So at least when you get started, that's something that be prepared for that kind of question to make those comparisons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 5 is remember Occam's razor. And if you've never heard of Occam's razor, feel free to look it up. But it tells you that simple usually wins. It drives me insane when our clients come to us and say, we need to see some AI. We need to get some machine learning up in here. Like, dude, you can really solve this with a dashboard. So remember that oftentimes simple usually wins. And you could maybe incrementally improve your model by a percentage or something by overcomplicating it by a tremendous amount. Make sure you're weighing the cost benefit and try to focus on things that are fairly simple. And then lastly, but you know, not lastly, but lastly on our list is whatever you do, especially when you're just getting started, make sure that what you do is super, super, super useful / relevant to the business owners, because otherwise they're going to think you're just producing just to produce. And to be honest, especially earlier in my career, I wanted to produce just to produce. I just leave me alone and let me build my models, you know, just let me build my cool models and get a great diagnostics. And that's what made me happy. But don't do that, because that will, you'll lose respect for that. So those are some quick tips. And like I said, if you want to take a quick screenshot of this page, this is how you can start to get started. And don't expect to do all of these in 1 year. It may take you 1.5 years, 2 years to get all 6 of these down. Okay, part 3, before Jerry closes us out, part 3 of Data Thinking Workshop is about data storytelling. I'm so excited. And we're hoping to have Gen. How do you pronounce Gen's last name, Jerry?
Ellsworth.
Yes, thank you. We're hoping to have him talk as our guest speaker. It's going out. Went out right at the end there. So hopefully Gen will be our data storytelling speaker. And that is on May the 10th. I believe the link is already up and available for registration. Yeah, that's right, it is. Other quick announcements, and I'm going to send these slides to everybody, is please listen to Tag Data Talk. And also let me know if you're interested in becoming a guest, or if you want to serve as a panelist guest and Tag Data Talk. It's a really fun podcast. And then thirdly, we have a For Good initiative that I mentioned earlier. If you're looking for experience in analytics data science, where you do a project that is for a nonprofit, there's a way to do that through TAG. And then fourthly, we're starting to promote our innovation awards. And Jessica, I don't think we have anything posted on that yet, but correct me if I'm wrong there. But the innovation awards are a project that you've done usually at your company that you felt was innovative in data science. And that's something you can submit toward our innovation awards. Quick thanks to our sponsor, Axis Group, that volunteered the space sponsor, even though we ended up going virtual, and our society sponsor, Big ID, which is Peggy Sy's company. Jerry, I will let you close us out as the kind of owner of the Data Thinking Workshop concept, sir.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Beverly, thank you to everybody for coming. So I'm Jerry DeMasso. I am our VP of Enablement at Access Group, and as Beverly said, I do own our data literacy and data thinking and enablement practices here at Access. I'm actually in the Atlanta office today, even though we are not. We are virtual, but yeah, it just seemed to work out better for everybody to be virtual. So we're going to continue to do that in our next session in May with data storytelling. And again, as one of our senior, he's actually our chief design architect at Access Group. So he has a lot of experience building, designing data stories, data analyses, dashboards, even algorithms, things like that for a lot of our customers. And that's going to be a really, really great session. So thank you everybody for coming. If reach out to me on LinkedIn. Access Group kind of runs the gamut in terms of data and analytics, ingestion, ETL, movement, storage, visualization, reporting, machine learning, data science, data engineering, all the things, enablement, change management, a lot of the stuff that we were just talking about. So thank you very much for coming, and again, reach out on LinkedIn for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care, guys. Bye now.